Hi, a pleasant day, everyone. So we will be discussing now under the subject of leadership, decision making, management, and administration. Our topic today is all about theories of public administration. So we will be tackling more on the theories that would somehow a contributory factor why particular public administration would come with a certain outcome or a certain action or a course of action and or design in order to come up with a successful or achieving of the goals and or objectives of a certain administration. So now let us proceed with our next slide. So what is administration? So we have three things here that actually define or even explain what administration is. First, administration is a planned approach to solve all kinds of problems in almost every individual or group activity, both public and private. So meaning to say, it talks about planned approach, okay? An approach in which could be used by a certain individual or group of individual in order to institute a particular solution to a problem and or an action in order to address what is necessarily to improve and of course to develop in a certain group of activities committed by a particular group of individual. So on the second perspective, in the broadest sense, okay, administration can be defined as the activities of groups cooperating to accomplish common goals. So, dito naman sa administration, it refers to an act. Okay? Kasi yung kanina, planned approach. Pag sinabing planned approach, it is a design in which could be used or followed by a certain group of individual in order to come up with a better solution of a certain issues and or problem. But in the second perspective, it talks about activities of groups cooperating to accomplish common goals. Meaning to say here, in this perspective, it refers to an action. It refers to an activity in which being utilized, being instituted by a certain group of individual or people that helping hand in hand in order to accomplish or finish a certain common goals. Pag sinabi natin common goals, it is a goal in which that should be accomplished and or being uh, achieved by a certain group of individual for the goodness and or the welfare of their group and or organization. Okay, let's proceed on the third perspective. Okay, it is as a type of cooperative human effort. Okay, cooperative human effort, ibig sabihin, each individual or uh, every individual in a group of people come to a common activities and then they are contributing what they can do for the group, okay, that has high degree of rationality, meaning to say high degree of rationality. They come to a certain place or a certain venue, discuss things, what should be their actions and or their programs in order to address to what is being desired by the group. The significance of high degree of rationality lies in human cooperation. Yes, human cooperation which varies in effectiveness of goal attainment. So, higher degree of rationality, ibig sabihin ng high degree of rationality, it talks about how an individual cooperate and interact with other brains or other individual in a group that somehow vary with effectiveness of goal attainment. So, di ba? Ibig sabihin, pag mayroong objectives in order to attain the goal that they have set up for a certain group, of course, each and every member of the group, therefore, is cooperating and interacting with the whole group in order to give their ideas, okay, to somehow give the possible solutions on the things that they need to attain in order to achieve their goals in the particular group. Okay, what then is public administration? So according here, Public administration is a species belonging to genus administration. So pag sinabing genus administration, it is a kind or a common of administration, a kind or a group of administration. Which genus is term belongs to a family which we may call cooperative human action. So pag sinabing cooperative human action, public administration, it refers to a collated acts or a collated activities done by a certain group of individual which has a common goal to achieve. Now, let us proceed with public administration theory. So, public administration theory, it is the amalgamation of history. Pag sinabing amalgamation is a combination or a result, okay? It is a result, a combination or a product of history, organizational theory, social theory, political theory, and related studies focus on the meanings, structures, and functions of public service in all its forms. So, meaning to say, ito palang public administration theory ay na kung saan ito yung a combination, okay, or a result coming from the history just because of the existence of the organizational theory, social theory that somehow emerge as one together in which give an idea to each and every member or individual in a group to come up with a certain action, in which case structures and functions of public service in all its forms. So public service. Second one, often recounts major historical foundation for the study of bureaucracy as well as epistemology. So meaning to say, recounts major historical foundation. So meaning to say, it coming from or the basic of which or the foundation is for the study of bureaucracy. So when we say bureaucracy is that it is pertaining to a design or a flow of a certain organization that talks about the functions of the executive personnel in an organization from those people not coming from the elected as the representative of the people, but it is coming from a definite group of organization and or public organization in which in the service to the people it served. Like for example, PNP, di ba? So PNP is composed of bureaucratic type of management and or administration. Okay? BGMP as well. And the BFP, it composed of, it is actually in line with the bureaucratic type or bureaucratic type of administration. So, as well as epistemological issues associated with public service as a profession and as an academic field. So as well as when we say epistemological issues, it talks about theory of knowledge, okay? Or theory of knowledge issues associated with public service in which just because of the issues that somehow arise, it forms a certain group of individual to come up with a better solution or an action pertaining to resolve such issues. And next is in more recent times, the field has had three main branches. First, new public administration. Okay, so it is now it is the type of public administration in which case being utilized or being used uh, by the current existence of the community. The second is classic public administration. So pag sinabing classic public administration, it is somewhat like the type of public administration that exists a few years back or a decade or a century. Okay? And postmodern public administration. Itong postmodern public administration, it's somewhat like a result or a product of imaginative contemplation, di ba? Para bang imagination na somehow it exists or might occur, di ba, on a particular group of people or in a certain community. We are now here at characteristics of administration. This is according to Waldo in 1955. The characteristics of administration are best subsumed under two terms, organization and management. So organization is the anatomy. Management is the theology of administration. So meaning organization is the anatomy, the main character of a particular group or the organization. Here it comes, the management is the physiology of administration. So meaning to say, physiology of administration, it talks about the totality as to the function of the administration. So it talks about how should it be administered, how should it be managed, and how it should be instituted. On the second perspective is that organization is the structure, meaning to say it talks about how it is being structured, talks about its manner of construction or how it is being presented. While management is the functioning of administration, meaning to say functioning of administration, it talks more about on how should the plan goes on, how should the plan be instituted, and how should the plan uh, being instituted accordingly based on the management or managerial function of a certain personnel in the organization. Now let us proceed in the theories of public administration. So accordingly, theories are analytical tool for understanding, explaining, and making predictions about a given subject matter. So pag sinabing theory, it is an imaginative contemplation of reality, meaning to say they are going to predict what might happen, and they are going to analyze and try to understand and explain why these certain things exist and why these certain things actually occurred in these timely issues. Okay? So, analytical tool. Pag sinabing analytical tool, it is might be a product of or they are going to resort with the scientific studies and or scientific findings in order to come up with a better and greater result as to what they decide to. First, we have the classical public administration theory. Pag sinabi nating classical public administration theory, this is the type of a public administration theory in which case it arises a decade ago or a century ago. Okay, so the classical approach is based upon the ideas similarly generated in the late 1800s and early 1900s and are primarily based upon the economic rationality of all employees. So meaning to say, for a certain individual uh, uh, be uh, be motivated and able to do such actions and or activities and or their job is actually they are being motivated with the opportunities that provide them the greatest economic gain. So here, let's take this citation. This evolved around the classical assumption of Adam Smith that people are motivated by economic incentives and that they will rationally consider opportunities that provide for them the greatest economic gain. So, meaning to say, as much as they could found an opportunity to this certain activity or this certain work and or job, they would consider this as uh, greatest economic gain on their part if they are going to rationalize it and understand the advantages that they could take from it. Okay, so meaning to say, people a while back actually they are being motivated with regard to economic gain or an economic that would somehow give them gain in return to the service that they could give. Meaning to say, they are very functional, considering that based on the rationality of their decision and rationality of their actions, it would somehow lead them to the greatest economic gain. So the rational economic view is summarized as below based on Skin's position as quoted by Smith and others or et al. In 2007. So accordingly, organizations can be designed in ways to control irrational emotions, okay? And thus unpredictable dysfunctional behaviors of employees. So meaning to say, uh, the organization actually is being designed here or being actually created just because somewhat like to control or to address the irrational emotions. So pag sinabi natin irrational emotions, this is somewhat like uncontrollable, di ba? Uncontrollable in which or in which case that there's no time on the part of a certain employee to think of a certain emotion before he should act or to portray such emotion he feels or she feels. In which case, accordingly, that these are really unpredictable, dysfunctional behaviors of employees that anytime could occur at the moment that the employee could feel something not good or something bitter. Okay? Something bitter, not better. Something bitter. Okay. So there are three branches which feed on the same underlying principle of classical theory. These are first, scientific management. So pag sinabi pala natin scientific management, it undergone or underwent thorough study, thorough research in order for to address the good and the welfare of the employee as to achieving the common goal of the organization. Second, administrative principles. Pag sinabing administrative principle, it talks about how the management or the admin, okay, or the administration addresses such issues pertaining to the principle and policy that the organization had set. Okay? And the third is bureaucratic organization theory. Pag sinabing bureaucratic organization theory, it talks about the standardized or the design of the flow of the functions and the power and or functions of each and every uh, 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 executive personnel in a certain organization. So bureaucratic organization theory, because in a bureaucratic organization theory, merong pinakataas na tao in a certain position, meron sa baba at sa pinakababa. So yun yung sinasabi nating bureaucratic organization theory, in which whenever there are some issues that need to be addressed, it must be addressed first to the authority, in which an authority could have a direct access or communication to the highest position or higher position. Need not coming from the lowest position automatically going up to the highest position. Kinakailangan it should be addressed first to the person nearer to the highest position. Okay, so these are the things that actually comprises uh, the classical public administration theory. Second theory, we have the modern public administration theory. So under which it's somewhat like different from the classical public administration theory. Why? Because in the modern theory of public administration, it emphasizes more on behavioral, okay? More on behavioral and quantitative school of thought. So pag sinabi natin behavioral, this pertains or dealing more on the behavior perspective or aspect of a particular employee and or the personnel. And quantitative, so pag sinabing quantitative, it is dealing more or talking more about the result, okay, or the number of result or the number of an outputs or an outcomes a particular personnel could produce rather than to the qualitative perspective. Okay? So modern management theory has changed the way public administrators look at their jobs. Okay? So advancement and refinements in management theory and practice have enabled managers and managerial system to evolve. So meaning to say advancement and refinements. They talk about with of course a particular goal of the organization would not have been successful if they are not going to look into the behavioral perspective of an employee, how they behave in the workspace or in the job space that they could actually perform in a certain organization. Were they really doing their job? Were they really functional and efficient in the job that being delegated to them? And the quantitative talks about as to the number of the job or the result that they carried out on the daily routine that they could perform, okay, rather than the quality. So meaning to say it drastically changes the approach of the public administration, in which case the managers and the managerial system would have to evolve somehow with this new approach. So the modern approach to public administration is oriented to results, okay, focusing on clients, outputs, and outcomes. Here we come. So meaning to say it is more oriented with the result, the outputs, and the outcomes. basically talks about the quantitative, okay? The quantity of the result, okay? The quantity of the outputs and the quantity of the outcomes that need to be produced or need to be manifested with the due time that they have set up. And of course, oriented to focusing on clients. Since we are talking about the behavioral perspective of a particular person or personnel in the organization, they focus on the client's behavior as to their performance, their functions, being efficient and being effective as to performing their daily job and or their daily activities in a certain organization. So the adoption of new form of public management means the emergence of a new paradigm in a public sector. This is a word or a study of Katsamonska of 2010. Okay, so a while back, I've discussed a brief on the modern approach to public administration. Here we're going to chop it chop a little bit on the explanation on the modern public administration. Here we have the system approach or model. So this is also called system analysis or of organization, and it was developed in the 50s to eliminate the deficiencies of the classical model by requiring that any organization should be viewed as a system and its action performed. Be reminded that in the classical model of or in the classical mode of public administration, it talks more about on a particular personnel in which they would have to perform based on the economic gain that they could take from it, rather than with the system of approaches that would somehow let the impersonal to follow what is desired by a certain organization that they are into, in which case that any organization should be viewed as a system and its action performed. So meaning to say, viewed as a system and its actions performed, the actions that they performed somewhat like in conformity with what is the system being set by the organization. Because unang-una, a certain action would not be successful and will not be achieved by a certain group of individual or a personnel in the organization if they will not follow a certain system or a rule that's set by the organization. Otherwise, the result will become failure. So the system theory is, however, a unified whole having a number of interdependent parts or subsystems. So meaning to say, having a number of interdependent parts or a subsystem, in which case this particular part would have to work this their function, their job accordingly, and the other part as well, they are going to perform their job. And right after, they are going to collate, they are going to integrate, di ba? They are going to integrate the product of their study, the product of their outcomes, so that they will be able to come up with the general result of what they have gone through with their research, their studies, and of course, the product of the evaluation and the analysis of their works together. Okay, so and it has identifiable boundaries that distinguish it from its surrounding environment in which it is embedded and with which it interacts. So meaning to say, somewhat like the result of which should be separated from what the environment or the outside stimuli that would somehow affects or interacts the decision or the result of their work outcome. And the system theory explains how public administration activities are coordinated within a system and subsystem that interact. So meaning to say, under the system approach or system models, that it explains on how the public administration activities coordinated with the system or within the system. Because unang-una, the result or the byproduct of the organization's activity and or organization's operation would always end up with how they follow the protocol under the system that the organization set up. And of course, the subsystem that interact together in the system. Because like for example, the organization is composed of different departments. Meron tayong HR department, merong executive department, uh, merong supervisory department, merong managerial department. All these departments were considered to be the sub-department of the organization in which they are following to the system that they also adapted and doing the subsystem they have adapted in each and every of the department. So meaning the subsystem of every department is actually in conformity or interacting with the system that the organization has set for everyone or for the totality of the policy of the organization. So yun yung system approach, okay? Okay. So second one is structural functional approach. The structural functional approach, it talks about how a certain organization is being structured as to the function, as to the powers that they are going to manifest in order to operate or to pursue with the operation of the organization. This is likely happening or being manifested in every or each and every organization of or the public administration or public organization or government organization for that matter. So these structures function to ensure the delivery of services to the public. So meaning to say, merong structure as to what should be the first step, the second step, and to whom it should be addressed, what should be the specific course of action in order to address these services for the public. And structural functionalism, or simply referred to as functionalism, is the relation, okay, is the relations among government subsystem such as intergovernmental relations with the goal of achieving desired goals through an institutional arrangement that performs certain functions in order to survive and operate efficiently. So like for example, what is the structural functional approach of the PNP that would somehow interrelated and interconnected with the structural functional approach of the PDEA as to operation pertaining to drug by bust operation, di ba? So meaning to say, meron silang structural functional approach somewhat alike in sub-governmental agencies, in which case somehow they could interact with one another and interchange the idea as to what would be the outcome and what would be the system, what would be the type of structure of the operation that they should follow, considering that they already met in the halfway, that they have somewhat like or a like structural functional approach that they could adapted, that they could follow actually or manifested during the interagency relationship or interagency activities. Second one, contingency approach. Ano ba tong contingency approach? Tong contingency approach also known as dependent approach. In which case, sabi dito, it is a class of behavioral theory that claims that there is no best way to organize a corporation, okay, to lead a company or to make decisions. Instead, the optimal course of action is contingent upon the internal and external situation. So, meaning to say, there is no best thing or way to organize a corporation, okay, to lead a company or to make decisions, but it always boils down with or being somewhat like affected with what should be the internal and external situation. So meaning to say, the action should a manager or a supervisor to initiate within the organization or within the department of the organization is based only the situation that they are actually experiencing in internal or external issues. Okay? They are going to address it based on the external issue or based on the internal issue. So meaning to say, that is the best way in order to deal what should be the course of action to do. What should be the plan that they are going to initiate based on this approach, which is the contingency plan. So meaning to say, this is case-to-case basis. The manifestation of a certain action should always be in conformity as to the type of the external situation or internal situation that they are currently experiencing. So ito yung konsepto ng contingency approach. So next is the behavioral school. In the behavioral school, actually, it is referring more on the behavior of a certain individual or a personnel, in which case talks about more on how the personnel is effective enough and efficient as to performing their job and their work that designated for them. And it is best suited to addressing in what would be a particular action and or program that would somehow make the personnel or the employee become effective, efficient, and very well versed as to the system that the organization has set forth in order for them to follow. So basically, it boils down to the level of understanding the system and or the possible manifestation of remedy in order to address the disorder behavior or the behavioral disorder of a particular personnel and or the employee. And the last theory for public administration is postmodern modern public administration theory. So in this theory, it is broad and somewhat ambiguous. Okay, so meaning to say, it does not pinpointing or pointing out a clear image or clear canvas to let understand the this particular theory of what would be the outcome or the result. Okay, so belief or ambiguous belief system tied to the philosophical and cultural reaction to the conviction of modernism. So it's sometimes equated with humanism. So postmodernism is the philosophical proposal that reality is ultimately inaccessible by human investigation. So it seems, yes, it is somewhat like broad and ambiguous belief, in which case, accordingly, that the proposal or the philosophical proposal in which is that the reality is ultimately inaccessible by human investigation. So somewhat like it does not give a concrete result or it does not give a concrete remedy as to the situation that a certain organization or a group of individual is facing with a certain issues that need to be addressed therefore. So that knowledge is a social construction, that truth claims are political power plays, and that the meaning of words is to be determined by readers, not the authors. So, meaning to say, it is more on putting the issues and or the problems on the general perspective of population or the general perspective of individual in a certain group rather than giving away or giving the system or paving a way in order to give an idea to every individual in the group as to what would be the possible result or outcome whenever uh, this particular system will be manifested or addresses so that those issues and or problems will be resolved thereof. So the postmodern public administration theory does not give a uh, concrete way or concrete remedy as to what would be the course of action to be taken whenever a particular group of individual would encounter certain issues and or the problem. So that's all for the postmodern public administration theory. So moving on, here we are still stick on the postmodernism, in which case it really tries to understand on the part as to the difference between modernism and the postmodernism over whether it is possible to find rational solution to by society's problem. So meaning to say, the postmodernism or the postmodern public administration talks more about or trying to do a thing in which case trying to differentiate the system that being initiated by the modernism and the system that should be initiated under the postmodernism. So somewhat like under which postmodernists question some foundations such as the system that tend to privilege some groups and downgrade the importance of others. So meaning to say, it does not really give a clear or a concise solution to a problem, in which case they are trying to differentiate as to the outcome of the system, okay, as to the outcome whenever the particular organization would follow a system and would somehow degrade or would downgrade rather or would somehow disregarded those other possibilities uh, that would be given important to others rather than focusing on those people that would somehow have an access to the system that might somehow in favor to these people. So meaning to say, the postmortem tries tries to look into the problem as to what it is in following the system, where in fact if there are some others would be affected by means of downgrading them as to the importance of things that might be taken by the others, di ba? So para bang they are very ambiguous as to giving solutions or as to giving remedy of what would be the possible action or things to be initiated to best address those issues rather than by following the system, di ba? So yun yung perspektibo ng postmodernism dito. So here we are. These are the following or the effects or contribution of theories in the field of public administration. Because of the rise or the existence of those theories, the classical, the modern, and the postmodern public administration are the key factors and or the foundations in which case it come up with the result or the effects of the following. First, uh, it resulted to public-private partnership. Just because of those public administration or theories of a public administration, this would somehow give an idea as to public-private partnership, since under the modern public administration, it talks about the interagency relation. Okay? Interagency relation in which structural functional policy, di ba? In the structural functional system rather talks about how would a particular agency interact with the other agency with the common system that they are following to. Okay, with same structure that they have adapted. Next one is public administration in policy making. So public administration in policy making, they look into as to what is the best remedy in order for the employee or personnel become effective and efficient in their job. Okay. And what would be the best solution and or remedy in order to address the behavioral perspective of a particular employee or personnel, and also as to their uh, quantitative, okay, the quantitative of the work and or outputs that they should manifested along their work and their job. So that is the public administration in policy making, as to the revision, as to the improvement, diba? As to revisiting the policy of the public administration. Next is movements towards political economy, diba? So movements towards political economy, it talks about more on what would be the best thing to address the issues in terms of economic gain on the part of the employee and or the personnel that should be taken, an action to be taken by the administrator or by the employer itself. Okay? So new emerging goals of public administration, what would be the new goal that the public administration should adapt or should be manifested in order really to give their services to the public? Staff and line units are complementary, not antagonistic. Yes, staff and line units are complementary. Bakit complementary o talagang magsasamang dalawang ito? Combination of works? Kasi in the staff unit, these are those personnel or a unit in which case their function is more on administrative function, more on paperwork, so more on policy making, more on the system making, more on giving the instructions, more on the improvement, and more on the development. While on the line units, they are more, going back to the staff in totality is more on planning and development. While on the line units, they are more on the execution of what are the things set up by the staff unit. So meaning to say, the line unit, these are those in the field, okay? They are the one to execute, they are the one to initiate, they are the one to follow the rules and regulations, following the system, and following the protocols. Okay? So not antagonistic, meaning to say not a negative result, or not would somehow bar the development, the improvement, and the achievement of the organization. Human relations approach in public administration. Yes, human relations approach, meaning to say in the public administration, of course, human relation approach, since it is being tackled under the modern public administration, in which case they look into the behavioral perspective of a particular person or the behavior of a person, in which case how should this behavior better addressed by the administrator so that the human relations approach might become workable, might become effective and efficient between two personnel or between two people in different departments in an organization. So yun yung human relations approach. Okay? So because a particular organization will not uh, become an atmosphere of solemnity, an atmosphere of friendliness, or an atmosphere of harmony whenever employees working in these particular departments of the organization is not healthy in terms of human relationships. Okay? Next is people's participation decision making. Yes, of course, just because of the modern public administration, they actually entertaining the participation as to decision making, since it does not only involve with one person, because in the particular group of individual it really composed or comprised with different person with different great ideas, different minds, and different perspective as to what might be the possible solution, what might be the possible good plan or effective plan in order to initiate, to come up with a successful or to achieve the goal of the organization. Decentralization. Pag sinabing decentralization, ibig sabihin, okay, designating, okay, giving function in this department, giving function on this unit, giving function on this particular group rather than centralization. Because pag sinabi mong centralization, the other departments will not become effective, will not become functional unless otherwise there is an order or a command coming from the higher authority that they should do this, they should do that. Whereas in the decentralization, they are actually functioning effective and doing their job and their work based on the system that set up by the organization that they are following. Okay? That they are following, and they have this what we call subsystem. The subsystem now is what is the system that the department is what they are following in conformity with the system of the organization, as what we have discussed a while back under the modern public administration. They are following the subsystem that they have in their department in conformity with the system that the organization is setting forth. Okay? So, meaning to say, they actually meeting the goal of the organization by this decentralization. Okay? So, next is emerging changes in bureaucratic pattern behavior. So perfect example lamang dito sa decentralization is that, like for example, US, di ba? US is decentralized type of the government sila kasi yung US composed of different states. Okay? Bakit decentralized? Kasi yung state of California, state of kanang California, Los Angeles, di ba? State of kaning Mexico, they actually have their own policy. They have their protocol, they have their laws, and they have their system. Kaya nga naging decentralized. At of course, they would take the order from the highest authority, the president of the US, as the totality, di ba? Yun nga lang, as to the function of the work job and execution of their function and powers is naka-decentralize para ipamunuan nila yung kanilang departamento or yung kanilang jurisdiction. Last one is emerging changes in bureaucratic pattern and behavior. So what might be now the bureaucratic pattern and the behavior? Okay, mayroon ng mga changes that emerges, that happening, o na nangyayari as to bureaucratic pattern and behavior, di ba? So hindi lamang yung lower position would always looking to or kining waiting for the order and or command from the higher authority, but whenever those people in the lowest authority would already observe that there are a lot of discrepancies, and waiting the order and the command of the higher authority is not a necessity for them to sacrifice the quality of the work, and that is the time that they are going to communicate the higher or the highest authority to address such concern and or the issues. Okay, so those are the things that actually emerge, or the effects, because of the theories under the field of public administration. Thank you, class. Thank you, everyone. So God bless you. bless you all. Hopefully that you did not learn a bit, but you learned a lot. So whatever your questions or clarifications, so you better address that, or else whenever you want to search more or additional details and or add-ons, you can search on the Google that or on the site that is very kining tawagan na maaasahan, di ba? Or reliable sources for that matter. Thank you. God bless you all.